Yes, of course, customize. What are we? Who are we? And what we're
Customize,
really
yeah.
trying to do here. We are a customer data platform built
Mhm.
specifically for small and medium-sized businesses. We have a mantra, a vision, and a mission to make technology accessible for all e-commerce businesses. It's what we stand by. It's what we think some parts of the data infrastructural part of the software world hasn't accomplished as of yet.
Okay.
We are built to make exactly some of those technology that is a necessity for e-commerce
Mhm.
business to strive, to thrive, and to actually create the best customer experience. We make that
Mhm.
available to them at a much earlier maturity, at a much more obtainable price level, and at a
Mhm.
much more, of course, obtainable maintenance level. So
Okay.
we're trying to standardize some of the more advanced data infrastructure solution as the customer data
Mhm. Mhm.
platform is, and we're on a good path of that journey. Of course, when you're
Mhm.
trying
Mhm.
to make transactional software, we kind of sometimes have a little bit of a funny saying internally that we want to be the Shopify of the CDP ecosystem. That after that
Okay.
6 to 8 years of the CMS industry really took it
Mhm.
by is and made something transactional. Pipedrive did it as well with the CRM. There's
Mhm.
a lot of great cases out there of
Yeah.
organizations trying to standardize quite complex technology, and we're in that bracket. And of course, we are still a young organization. Of
Okay.
course, founded in 2020 in the midst
Mhm.
of the COVID-19,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
but of course, when there's a a little bit of course both depression in and recession in the market, there's a necessity and a need of
Yep.
innovation.
Yep.
And we kind of course saw it back in with the financial crisis in 2008. Some of the
Mhm.
best scale ups and some of the most, of course,
Yep.
interesting entrepreneurial journey came from the back of that crisis.
Oh yeah.
And I think we'll see something similar to that here in with the COVID-19. Hopefully, we will.
Well, I
Fingers
mean,
crossed of that.
we're already seeing it. I mean, with Clubhouse, for example, not
Yeah.
to talk about those vaccine companies like Moderna, which is a super small startup in biotech, and I mean, things are exploding. It's just like about adaptation, right? And
Yeah.
humans that don't adapt well, I mean, they're not made for those markets because our markets are kind of the definition of a Darwinian market in which, like, I mean, if you go outside, you won't get hunted by your neighbor, right? That used to be the case back in the days. Nowadays, it's safe outside, but the business world, that's where we compete. That's where we chop or throats, like in some way. So, I mean, it's kind of it is what it is. And as I like to say, what must go down will come back up. I mean, that's just another law of nature. And like, congrats on starting this during COVID. I mean, it is brave, and yeah, I do think you guys have a bright future. I think what you guys are doing is super cool. I'll come back to a couple of business things that you said because
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
that was interesting. But I want to rewind back the clocks here with something you said, like you live next to the office. So how, because on my side I've been a nomad for like 6 years and I've always worked, inside Airbnbs, nice ones with like views.
Yeah.
Yet I did not really separate like work and personal. I've tried like co-working spaces, and I mean, my performance was like equal, if not lower. What has been your feedback towards working outside of home, and how has it impacted your productivity?
No, it's a brilliant question, and of course, there's so many different determinants and factors playing into that equation. Of course,
Mhm.
I look at it from two different perspectives. When I kind of try to absorb the question and reflect on it, I see my
Mhm.
personal kind of course, both ambition, progression, and what makes me thrive and perform the most.
Mhm.
And then I see the other part of the question, kind of the equation, which is the company
Mhm.
and of course my colleagues or
Yep.
employees' performances, and how do I kind of mix the two of those. And I've always
Mhm.
kind of, and when I look at myself, I've always believed in my leadership to be very, very accessible. which
Okay.
needs for me to be active, near, close,
Yep.
and that I'm always obtainable for everyone in the business, regardless of seniority, regardless of
Yep.
question. So it's something that's always been a big part of my leadership philosophy, that I'm
Okay.
very close to everyone
Okay.
in some capacity. It doesn't need to be geographically, but it needs to be, of course, that we get to kind of create, of course, both culture and the way that we work as a business, in the sense of
Okay.
what we believe is of course is creating the best performances for everyone. And take it into my personal side, of course, as you mentioned, when living close to the office, I've always
Yeah.
liked being in the office. I thrive off people's energy, my colleagues, partners, everyone. I love seeing them. I love the creativity, the dynamics that is sometimes happening when you're close to each other, and when there is that
Oh
physical
yeah.
presence.
Okay.
But I also combine that with, of course, an extreme remote kind of functionality. We are in hybrid
Okay.
organization. That means that
Yep.
we define our workspaces, our physical workspaces, as creative workspaces, which means that
Okay.
you are not forced to be in there. But we hope that could give that kind of energy and that spark. I would tend to say to people, do come in if possible on Mondays. That's when we need each other. That's when we sometimes, of course, that where we can use that energy to bounce off each other and create those, of course,
Okay.
very good both sprints that can follow into other perspective of it. But we also, of course, as an organization that is globalized, we have
Okay.
like several different nationalities, we have several different geographic locations. So we also try to do this, how can we make that into a function where it doesn't, is not limited by the geographical present, and there's quite a few ways to kind of skin that cat. But we also kind of, where it's an interesting part of it, when we are an organization that was born in COVID-19, we were remote built from the get-go. We were a global office with, of course, several different locations. So we needed to figure out a way to have the progression, the project management, the control over certain kind of factors like communication, of course, of course, also the project side of it. And that's been some interesting challenges that's come from that, for sure.
Interesting. And I guess, yes, this is the modern organization. It's hybrid. It's between remote and having a creative space, a physical creative space. Shout out to one of my clients, Office Together. You might want to look him up, depending on how many employees you have. But that's what they do. They reorganize, like coming back to the office by booking spaces. When you come to the office, you use their software to book spaces. So shout out to Amy. She's a really smart and really performant founder that is one of my clients. And I guess, yeah, it's super interesting what you mentioned. And I guess I'm a bit disconnected from that physical model, although like I do have a wife and physical friends, but like energy, like face-to-face energy is sometimes quite important. And I mean, even Zoom, it will never really mimic that. So that's quite interesting. And I wanted to touch back on a second point, which deeply interests me. And I know that this is more the case in SaaS, less in companies like mine, an agency. I mean, I'm SaaSifying slowly but surely. But you guys have kind of sprints, and you need to meet objectives, and which is why right now you were telling me that sometimes you got to rush, sometimes you got to finish stuff up, sometimes you got to deliver features and meet the roadmap. So is that, well, let me ask you that first. Like, I guess your normal schedule is not leaving the office at 10, but how is that different style of work vs mine, which is just like leaving the computer at like 5, maybe coming back to it later? But I start my day at 8, I finish them at 5 usually, and yeah, I might do some exceptions. So tell me more about this way of doing things.
Yeah, like when you look at an organization like ours, of course, we look at trying to, of course, centralize our individuals. We are not bound. A little bit, it falls into your other question, of course, with the mixture between the remote and, of course, the physical offices.
Okay.
We are not bound by the geographic location, but we are bound by time zones. So, of course, we have our kind of daily base and our daily work being done between 7:30 and 9. So we have that flexible scale where people can allocate their 37, 40 hours a week throughout that particular schedule. And then, of course, you you'd have your sprint meetings and you'd have your stand-ups that follow into that equation, but that doesn't require you to be in the office at all. But of course, when I look at it and I see a few things that I not that concerns me, but that's exactly the objections and objectives that you're mentioning. Things that, of course, also retention. So making sure that, of course, that our staff have that natural feel with the organization. They feel like they are emotionally bound to part of the journey, the progression of the organization through some kind of involvement, either with their direct managers, could be colleagues, it could be me, it could be the other co-founder or the other senior executive teams. But we see that there is a necessity for us to figure out a way to connect. And that doesn't mean exactly, I completely agree with what you're saying there, Charles, as well. That doesn't mean that we need to be seeing each other every once a week, but that means that we probably do these kind of every quarter, have the entire business invited either to Copenhagen or another location to then do a complete and utter socialization of the organization, to cultivate it in that way instead. Because it doesn't mean that we need to see each other in a business context all the time, but to kind of get that understanding of each other and some of the things exactly that I used to miss out on when being kind of full remote. That's often exactly just that kind of physical presence of seeing, okay, this is an individual that we see sometimes out of the business, and then we can actually encapsulate that into the way that we run our normal business, which would be a little bit more remote basis. But it's also exactly as you mentioned, it's not something that is it's not easy not to crack, and it also depends a lot on the culture. It depends a lot on the individual and how they thrive the best, and that falls back into recruitment process of identifying whether that's something of an environment that is actually applicable to those individuals that we try to hire, because we need to have a business that also have the proficiency and the sufficiency as well for ensuring, of course, the well-being of customers and organization.
I think, those are good points. I'm reading the book of WeWork, which is kind of well, not a failure case, but there's a lot of lessons in WeWork. But something that they were doing right, is kind of, and that's controversial. I mean, some people will not say so, but they built a great culture, like, I mean, they were pretty strong on company events. They were good at partying and at having people together in one objective. Adam Newman used to give them stocks, obviously, and he had this kind of Steve Jobs presence that when he was in your circle, he would kind of change your vision of things and redefine what was possible. And I mean, there's other companies that have done it well, obviously Facebook. And I guess that, yes, working elbow to elbow and hacking something together gives you a greater sense of purpose. And as we know, most employees at Facebook, it's business before their personal life. Most of them don't even have outside lives, which can be a good thing depending on where you want to go in life. But I guess that's a good thing to have and to go further. Although, like, on my side, in some of my employees, most of them, they work asymmetric schedules, so they might log in even at 10 p.m. I don't really know that, and I don't have ways to tracking it, but I know it because they just tell me, and I see them working sometimes on our
exactly
software, but they want to do more. And that's definitely a good point related to culture. I want to shift gears here and talk a bit more about sales. So right now in your organization, like, who's in charge of booking meetings and who's in charge of closing them?
So we are, of course, one of the things you figure out very, very early, of course, when building software as a service organization, of course, is kind of figuring out the equation of unit economics. And in that way, that would always lead to a specific philosophy when it comes to sales and customer acquisition, because it would need to be based out of a view of a numbers game. But of course, the other co-founder, so of course I'm CEO of Customize, the other co-founder, Christopher, brilliant guy, also a dear friend. He is a CCO, so of course Chief Commercial Officer, in charge of the entire, of course, commercialization strategy, go-to-market strategy, of course, in combination with the rest of the senior leadership. But he's still on an active role. He's
Okay.
still hands-on, also because he loves it, and probably it can't stop. He'll do it at one point. And
Yeah.
then we also, of course, we have a director of partnerships.
Okay.
Of course, that falls into our go-to-market strategy. That's also aligned with the partnership model. And then, of course, we have kind of a sales executive side of it. So we have kind of mixed it and put it in two different equations. We have, of course, kind of the normal SDR model. Of course, it would be the sales development representatives, kind of doing the early engagement meetings, have a bit of conversation with them, be a lot about also some of the outbound, inbound kind of first conversation. And that will be everything between 15 to 30 minutes. And then you'd go into a closing meeting with a senior individual, which would be equivalent to an account executive. And that would actually be our senior team at the moment. And that works well. It works well because we can do it based on the unit economics we have. And also, of course, the deal flow, it can make sense to us. And also because it's a scalable, international, deployable model. And it's something we can run with a little bit towards some of the other kind of market entries we're going to do here in 2021 and 2022.
So for outbound, do you only do outbound for partnerships, or you also do it to sell your startup packages and X Pro 1.0?
So we actually predominantly do it for the agency and partnership model at first. It will naturally have a trickle-down effect to do a little bit more. What would be our marketing activities would be the outbound functionality for our direct customers. So we split it in those two kind of functionalities, not that because we know there is a complete synergy when we look at our target audience and our buying persona. They're very, very similar to each other. So we know there's a lot of reusability when it comes to content, marketing strategies, messaging strategies. We can actually combine a lot of it for both buying personas. And then it's just about twerking our audiences in the best way. But so yeah, that's something we're doing predominantly, again, with the maturity of our business for the partnership model, but we'll be kind of deploying a little bit more across the omnichannel in the future as well.
Interesting. How many inbound leads you get on a monthly basis, generally speaking?
Oh, that number, don't have it by hand. We get a bit, but again, with where we are as an organization, of course, when you're 11 months into it, which we are right now, of course, a lot of our activity have been based organically. So we get quite a bit of leads from our organic traffic. And that's also, of course, that the budget allocation, you're trying to get the most out of it in the early stage. And now, of course, following our pre-seed round, of course, where we have quite a bit more finances available as well, we can begin to allocate a little bit more into the paid advertisement and paid kind of course, channels as well. So it's a larger two-digit number of leads coming in, which is all right. Which is good for where we are as an organization.
Sure, it is.
But it's something where we can still optimize it, and that's where we have, of course, both the curiosity as well, but also we see some good tendency in our pipeline. Also, a lot led from the individuals that we have in our business, which is of quite a senior degree, have really played a good part in the validity of Customize as an organization, as a brand, as a product, that we can see actually has played well into kind of the way the perception of Customize has been here in the early user research.
Interesting. And is it too early also to ask about like a closing rate that you have? Say that you have, I don't know, 50 inbound leads. Is the closing rate somewhere around more the classic 20%, or is it in the high 50s?
I can say we're quite satisfied on that account. Let me say it like that. So we're on the high side. We also believe that when we look at it, kind of course, the sophistication of market, we have two different kind of buying personas and intended buyers. The more sophisticated part of the market, we have very, very, very lucrative and very, very good conversion rate right now of closings. We see a very, very good tendency on when we go out and approach these particular businesses and partnerships. It's very, very fruitful. Let me phrase it like that.
So like for who you target, I would guess it's mostly e-commerce for the moment, right?
Yeah, 100% e-commerce.
Okay. What size of e-commerce do you generally target? Do you go with the smaller shops? Because I know that for an e-commerce, for example, they can have only say 5 employees, and they can be making like north of like 50 million a year, or even 10 to 50 million. What kind of metric do you use to target your e-commerce? Is it more headcounts? Is it the
No,
annual revenue?
we do revenue based as well.
Okay.
So well, I see exactly the same as you do. There's some very, very interesting
Mm-hmm.
organizations out there that's performing extremely well, even with low headcount.
Mm-hmm.
That falls very much. They have a natural interest in our product due to, of course, the efficiency that we often provide. Of course, with marketers, as we are talking exactly e-commerce businesses, a lot of this is performance marketers, is of course is head of digital sales, is these
Yeah.
kind of individuals, e-commerce managers. A lot of them are spending quite a lot of time on, of course, looking into fragmented data kind of samples across
Correct.
the analytics systems, email systems, CMS systems. And of course, with our combination of centralizing that, we take a lot of their hours away from their hands and actually deliver it all in a service function. So with those organizations where they're extremely linear and even small, but with quite a high revenue, that's is also some of the very, very targeted business we're looking at. We can see there's a very, very high conversion rate on that as well. But when we define an e-commerce business within our bracket, when we look at this is what we want to do, we actually looking at, funny enough, Charles, you hit it straight on the nail, but we're looking at down to actually what we define as our micro segment, which is around $400,000 to $500,000 in yearly revenue. So the absolute smallest part of the market. And then we are up at around the 15 million, exactly where you hit it. So we not that we close it at the 15 million dollars in yearly revenue, but that's the ones that we believe has been left the most in the market that don't have the accessibility to data infrastructure solutions like the customer data platform. So that's really where we also know that that's where we want to position ourselves in the market, because that's where we know we can do the most good. It's also where we believe the market is the most underserved. So it falls both into the commercial strategy, but also just what our vision is set out to. So that's kind of how we define the SMB right now. But we also have businesses and customers that is a little bit above the 15 million. So it's not that we're saying no to them, but we that's kind of where we as an organization have wanted to position ourselves. That is a little bit of the smaller bracket of it.
Yeah, and they need to be able to afford it. Like you guys almost charge 400 euros. That's not for the startup plan, obviously. I mean, they can probably qualify themselves, but they need to be able to afford it. We have like 3 minutes left, so let's do a bit of rapid fire questions. I'm gonna start asking this one. Try to answer it like as quick and as efficiently as you can. But what are your top 3 growth hacks in terms of marketing? If I'm an e-commerce and I want to get more sales, what should I do?
If you are an e-commerce, hypothetically, you would be our customers. Then the combination of having an advanced segmentation engine that could kind of quantify your customers based on profitability, match that with price sensitivity insights and product recommendation, you have the cocktail to success, both statistically, to also better customer experiences, also, of course, better customer loyalty and higher conversion rate and better retargeting. So that's my 3 go-to when if I shoot it straight from the hip, it would be exactly qualified segmentation, product recommendation, matched with pricing sensitivity. You have a gold mine.
That's great. Shifting to Martin now, what are Martin's 3 best habits to create energy in his personal and business life?
Oh, that's a good question, and not a small one. I'll try to keep it simple. My private life is what fuels my business life with positivity. So I always try to really stay, of course, social. I spend a lot of time with family, with friends, with my partner. She gives me, of course, my friends give me a lot of energy, and I always try to prioritize my time around what makes me the best of myself, and that is the socialization. I'll put it into a second part as well. Traveling, experiencing things is something I really, really, really love. Of course, it's been a little bit limited, but I've always been, of course, both in a business context, but also in other contexts, traveling a lot in my life, which I I look back to and hopefully forward to with great pleasure and joy.
Mhm.
And then the third thing I'll say, I always prioritized both my private life and my business life out of Eisenhower's priority metrics, which is urgency and importancy.
Yep.
And that's what makes me make sure that I spend the time of my life at the things I know gives me the most.
That's really good three tips here. Last but not least, three books that you would recommend. They can be personal or business.
Uh, I'll just say an author, and then that will be what I'll say, and that's Daniel Kahneman. I've always had a passion for of course, both the business psychology and kind of consumer psychology. So I would say all books, but probably Thinking Fast and Slow with Daniel Kahneman. That would be probably one of the top ones. And then I have a few books on machine learning, but I'll probably leave that for myself. That's a little bit nerdy. Yeah, big data for dummies, things like that. I love them. I think they're easy. I think they're explainable, and I think
Yes.
they do a great job of trying to educate on modernized technologies as well.
Oh yeah, love the For Dummies book. But okay, Martin, thank you for coming to the podcast. It was short and sweet. I think we discussed about really interesting topics, especially around culture when we started the conversation. I'm wishing you a super good day, super end of your day. I know that you still have a couple of hours in front of you, so wishing you a great, a happy time there and a productive time. All right.
Likewise, Charles. Thank you for the time.
Cool. Have a good one. Bye bye.
Yeah, have a good one. Bye. Thank you.